Hi, my name is Ian Stalker, and you're listening to XVGM Radio.
Welcome to XVGM Radio, where the bits keep coming. I'm Justin.
And I'm Mike.
And this is episode 113, Robots, specifically for the game from 2005 that came out on the Game Boy Advance and the Nintendo DS.
Exactly. This one is awesome.
This one was a surprise. You said the game at one point, and I think I just gave this look of like, really? Robots? The licensed game based off the movie that nobody saw?
Yeah, the CG movie from back in the 2000s, yeah.
Although, like, it had an all-star cast. I don't know why. Like, I know I didn't see it. I still haven't seen this movie. My wife has seen it, and she enjoyed it. But, like, I don't know many people that have seen the movie.
Yeah. I saw a little bit of it a couple years back, but I wasn't that impressed with it. But I also am not a big fan of those, like, CG movies. Like,
no, you hate Pixar?
I'm just not. I don't watch a lot of those, you know? I mean, I watch them sometimes with my kids. I just saw the newest Garfield. That was fun.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What? You don't like Garfield?
I love Garfield. I don't like what they've done with the Garfield in modern times.
Oh.
I was a big fan of the Garfield and Friends cartoon. Okay. I was a big fan of the comics growing up.
Yeah.
Whenever they did those movies where they actually brought in Bill Murray, I was excited for Bill Murray to come in because of the whole like cartoon voice sounded like Bill Murray and everything else.
Sure.
And I was not a fan of those movies, and everything else that I've seen recently with Garfield, it just like,
oh, this is a totally different type of movie.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. It's fun. It's good. It's cute. It's worth watching. So, anyways, Robots on the Game Boy Advance and the Nintendo DS. They have the same soundtrack, by the way. Mm-hmm. This was composed by Ian Stalker, and we were lucky enough to have an interview with Mr. Stalker. And so we had a great chat with him, and you're going to have some questions from Mr. Stalker kind of sprinkled throughout this episode. So we hope you enjoy. So this is the intro movie that we just played.
Right.
And I gotta say, I really love the theremin sound.
Yes, I wrote that down as well. I was like,
I love that.
And I didn't pick it up until later because at first I thought they were supposed to be like trumpets or something, and then I heard more of the sliding, and I feel like it lives somewhere between the theremin and like a MIDI trumpet, but it definitely, with the way that it slides on a lot of those notes, it felt more like a theremin than anything else.
I mean, there's definitely a horn section present in this track as well. along with that really rich, funky bass.
Super thick.
Like really chunky. Yeah, I really dug that. So that like funky slap bass, that was really cool.
Yeah. I had the same kind of thought. It sounded like a slap bass, it's lacking the sound of like the slap
Yes.
that goes with it.
Yes.
So it was just really punchy and really thick, which I really liked.
Yeah.
I also like the opening to this track. It reminded me of an arcade game. Like it sounds like somebody put a coin in and you're now like a character select or something.
Yeah. This reminded me a lot of some of the soundtracks that Treasure did on the Game Boy Advance, actually. Stuff like the Gunstar Superheroes, as well as the Astro Boy soundtrack. That they did, because it has a very similar sound to it. The drums, let's talk about those snares. Very punchy, very in your face. I really like those snares. So I really, really enjoyed this from top to bottom. It was a great song. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it more as we go through the episode, but we actually played some of the game, you a lot more than me, just because I haven't had as much time to do anything with my life, let alone play games.
Yeah, I sat down with it after finishing my latest review and was just like, all right, let's check this game out. Let's see, because it's supposedly one of those like hidden gem sleeper kind of games. And I gotta say, it's pretty fun. Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about it throughout this episode, but I figured let's get into some questions with Mr. Stalker.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your musical journey from when you were a kid. What inspired you to create music in general, and what is your just music background regarding instruments or anything like that?
So I took piano lessons between like ages 10 and 13, and that gave me like the foundation of music, and I always liked improvising at the piano. I was a VGM junkie from a very early age. I was making cassette tapes in the late 80s and early 90s from Super Nintendo songs, whatever. And then kind of my earliest experience in picking together was listening to these cassette tapes with the Walkman at the piano, like rewinding and figuring out chord by chord and note by note, like what were the actual notes in this, this song from Secret of Mana or this song from Final Fantasy VI or whatever. And I took some jazz improv lessons for piano and didn't get to be like very good at it, but it at least gave me some confidence for like just following my intuition in picking out melodies, like making my own melodies and my own chords and more fundamentals of music. And then in high school, I took a college course that was a digital audio. This would have been back in like 96, 95 or something. And just learning how digital audio works on the software of the time, which gave me some more like basics. But in terms of writing music on the computer, it was very much figuring out other people's songs and putting them in, just learning to write music primarily using a tracker, using Screen Tracker 3 and then Impulse Tracker, which was a great piece of software because any song you downloaded, you could see all the notes to it and get all the samples to
Oh,
see
wow.
the entire it was like cracking open all the assets. And I learned a ton about how songs are put together, as well as like how to do a lot of fun acrobatics with limited channels to make echoing effects or making the most out of like 6 channels or 8 channels. Which helped a lot for the handheld era.
Okay, so that was during like the Game Boy Advance era, which you've worked on a lot of Game Boy Advance stuff. So it was around that era?
Well, so I started learning tracking in like the late 90s. And that was designed for the PC scene more than anything.
Okay.
And it just so happens that like a Pentium 90 back in that day is a similar spec to what you'd get if you had to make music for a Game Boy Advance game. It's like probably 6 to 8 channels for most of the songs, and it has to be under 200 kilobytes or something in sample memory. So my background with making these low impact mods with in the tracker world really helped when I moved into the Game Boy Color and then Game Boy Advance and then Nintendo DS.
Oh wow,
that's cool. All right, so Justin, what are we playing? It's your pick, so what do we got coming up?
All right, so the next track we're going to listen to is going to be the Train Station track.
All right.
And these were all composed by Ian Stalker, and obviously from the game that we're talking about, Robots on the Game Boy Advance and DS. Welcome back. That was Train Station from the Robots game that we're talking about all night long.
All day, every day on this
Yes.
very episode.
Yeah.
That's not all day or every day.
You know, close enough.
For 2 hours-ish.
Thereabouts.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one had another one of those things where the opening gave me a certain feel, and then the rest of the song kind of took off in another direction. Like the opening of this actually reminds me of some of the music from Myst.
Oh.
And then those synths kick in. For a little bit, I get Res vibes, like Res menu music.
Ba, ba, ba. Those really light, fluffy synths.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And then once it really kind of picks up after that, I just get like 80s feel all over the place.
Yes.
Like, very 80s. The percussion on that, the filter on the bass, the synths.
Womp, womp, womp.
Yeah. It all has this very like 80s synthwave feel.
Yeah, I really like this track. I will say that I feel like this one felt a little bit more 80s, whereas the previous track felt a little bit more Kraftwerk era, like 70s maybe.
Okay.
But even so, you can still tell that the instrumentation, everything is still the same soundtrack and everything. But I like that there are some things that switched up a little bit. The bass in particular sounds a little bit more muffled. Not in like a bad way, like a intentional sound.
It's the filter.
Yeah. So that was a nice choice. This also kind of felt a little bit like RPG music, particularly like Chrono Trigger when you're in the future.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
I could also see this in like the original Final Fantasy VII.
Yes.
Like this is good like industrial area music. Yeah, that too. Da, 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 da.
Yeah, for sure. Very cool. How involved was Vivendi Universal with this specific game?
I don't know if they submitted any feedback on the music. I never heard it, so I didn't get any notes from them because I was a contractor with Amaze, and so Vivendi would talk to Amaze, and then Amaze would talk to me. I never really went past them to the publisher. It was just it was simpler that way.
This game is pretty neat. It's kind of like an open-ended. It's like level-based, but it's like also open-ended in a way.
Open-ended or open world?
Like open world.
Oh, okay.
In the sense that you're kind of like meandering about as the main character, Rodney.
Rodney Copperbottom, yep.
Yes. And you're just moving around. You have a giant wrench that you are just smashing bad guys with. The combat's a little slow in a way. It's very much like when you hit characters, like you could do a combo if you press it fast, kind of like a triple hit combo, which really helps. But overall, there's not a lot to the combat.
Yeah, like I couldn't call this like a beat 'em up. Like,
no.
Yeah, the way that it plays at first, I thought that it was going to be like a beat 'em up, but because of how slow the combat is, I agree. It's not snappy enough to be a beat 'em up.
Yeah, graphics and the sprites themselves are pretty large for Game Boy Advance. In terms of the size, they're pretty decently sized. And yeah, so you're going around the different locations in each stage because like you can beat an area, and then after you like beat the boss or whatever and you move on, you save. You go in like these little like save stations.
Rooms?
Yeah. And then once you save, you go on to a new area, but you can also backtrack, which you'll need to do in various different places in order to like access different things. There's all these characters kind of floating about that are, I'm assuming, in the movie that you meet, and they're like, hey, I need to find this part.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Fetch quests.
Yeah, basically. So you're going around smashing different barrels and crates open and stuff like that to try to find what they're looking for. So on average, it's a pretty fun game. I haven't gotten that far in it. I'm probably about like 30 to 40% through with the game.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely farther than me because I got through the opening area, the train station and whatnot, and I started into the next area.
Yeah,
I'm headed towards where I'm trying to find Big Weld.
Yeah,
but yeah, the little thing that flies around with you, the little robot helicopter, what's called the Wonderbot,
your helper buddy.
Yeah, is pretty cool too. Like the way that you can switch between Rodney and Wonderbot.
To access new areas.
Yep.
Yeah, you could also later in the game like turn them into a platform and do like almost like a bouncy jumpy thing.
Like Rush Jet.
Yeah.
Or Rush.
Yeah, kind of.
or Rush,
Yeah. Rush coil.
Yes, that's the
Yeah, very similar to that. And then you could also like grab onto them and hang on and like go across, like, you know, kind of glide across.
Nifty.
So there's all different power-ups and things that you get when you beat different bosses and stuff like that. So it's cool. You know, honestly, playing the game makes me want to play, or makes me want to watch the movie just to kind of see like what happens, because now I'm like kind of invested and I want to know like, hey, you know, like who are these characters? Like what's going on in this actual movie? So I may have to like rent it at some point and or maybe like just watch it on like Disney Plus or something, or wherever I could find it.
Yeah.
What would you consider the musical inspirations for the songs in this game? Because I know I mentioned that, you know, I heard a lot of various different sounds and elements of it, but was there a specific musical inspiration that you used for this game?
Yeah, very specific. So as soon as I was signed on to the project lead, Mike Platter, emailed me and was like, okay, the soundtrack to the movie Robots will not be written in time for us to use anything from that in the game.
Okay.
It's being, you know, development is concurrent with the film production.
Oh,
and
wow.
He pretty much got permission from the publisher and license holder to do whatever we wanted for that. And he had something specific in mind, which was a Bananarama song called A Trick of the Night, the #1 mix. And when you listen to this, you'll be like, oh, I can see how this could set the tone for Robots. The first thing I did was try and recreate the bass line and drums and vamp from it in another tracker program I use called Buzz. And once I got the sound there, I pulled samples from that. So I made custom drum samples, custom bass samples, and that kind of set the tempo and feel and vibe for the overall soundtrack. There were a couple other inspirations as well. There's an anime called Robot Carnival, which is pretty old, but had an outstanding soundtrack that was all sampler based, and a lot of the big lush evolving pads kind of come from Robot Carnival.
All right, so next up, we're going to play a track called Big Weld Interior. Let's hit it. welcome back to our Robots Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS Spotlight, featuring an interview with Ian Stocker, the composer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this one was really bouncy. And again, the punchy drums. I really love that snare just throughout this entire soundtrack, just really punchy. I also got to say, I like that right before the track kind of fades out and you get this really kind of wispy kind of synth that makes it sound like the track's just gonna fade out. The loop kind of comes back in so perfectly with the it's just really funky and fun. It's a great track.
Agreed.
Yeah.
You got those toms in there, those synth toms, and some of the other synths that are going on there. You mentioned, I think, for the first track that we played, or the intro that we played, Kraftwerk. That one I didn't really get so much Kraftwerk out of, but this one kind of gave me some Kraftwerk vibes.
Oh, okay. Okay, I could see that. You know, actually, I'm going to be honest, I see more Amiga music in this one.
Oh, okay.
This really sounds like something coming out of an Amiga. I think it's that rolling kind of, you know, that.
The bass line and a lot of the lower sounds, I agree. I don't know if I agree with some of the higher pitch synths, but I could see this not necessarily coming out of an Amiga as it is, but I see this being rewritten for an Amiga and it sounding good.
It sounds or reminds me a lot of the Wolfchild soundtrack on Amiga. A lot of the synths kind of sound very similar. There's a lot of similarities there. So if I was to compare it with any kind of soundtrack, it reminded me a lot of like Martin Iveson and later Matt Furness's conversion onto the Genesis for Wolfchild. But yeah, it sounds a lot like that.
Okay.
Yeah. This track in particular. So,
yeah. The bass line on this one, I was kind of getting stuck in. It's funny because it's not a galloping bass, but it almost felt to me like a slowed down galloping bass. The tempo isn't exactly right, but it just
got a bit of a stutter.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's got like that do like yeah. I see what you mean. If you could collaborate with anyone, like any game composer, or really just anybody in the video game industry on a video game soundtrack, who would it be and why?
Thought a lot about this, and there are definitely a lot of people I look up to, but I don't know if I would be a good match for collaborating. Like, am I worthy of working with Yuzo Koshiro? He would probably be my first pick.
That's a good pick.
Yeah.
Mainly because, like, yeah, he made ActRaiser, which was hugely influential on me, but then, like, he just gets so deep into the technology. Like, he's built his own tools, and it's kind of equal parts tech and music, which is where I am as well. I also built my own custom tools for the soundtracks. So I don't know. We would probably have some fun things to chat about. I don't know. He's a better composer than I am, so I could offer moral support.
It's definitely one of those like we're not worthy kind of moments when you're stacked up against like a VGM god like him.
Masters of VGM.
Yeah, exactly.
As some of our other related podcasts talk about them. I feel like Yuzo Koshiro is the kind of person who would collaborate with someone and kind of not necessarily let them take the reins, but like kind of move to their groove. I mean, I don't know if there's any truth to that. It's just like the vibe I get from them.
I could see that because I mean he did a lot of work with some of the composers on like Streets of Rage 4, where he wasn't the sole composer,
right?
But he also like does a lot of individual games that are coming out now. There's some new like shmup that's coming out, like a shooter on the Sega Genesis, and his family-based company, his sister like is the artist or something like that, if I recall, and that's through Ancient, which is the company that it's like a family, it's like an in-house family kind of deal that he has family members working.
Protect Me Night.
Yeah, Protect Me Night, which later became God of Protectors. But it started out as an indie title, an Xbox Live indie title, and then it became what it is now, which is it's seen now technically 2 sequels or remakes or whatever you want to call them. In the very least, I'm going to have to go check out a bunch of your other soundtracks because I'm a sucker for licensed games. I think they're very underrated, like in terms of like licensed IPs. You've got stuff here in your soundtracks like Aragon, stuff like the Lego Star Wars 2, the original trilogy, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, which I have played, and that does have a great soundtrack. The Lemony Snicket's game, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I mean, 007, Everything or Nothing, which is the GBA port of the
console version, which the console had a great soundtrack and was a lot of fun. So I'll have to go check out the GBA version of it. And Daredevil too. That's another I'm a sucker for those like licensed like Marvel and DC like games, because especially in the Game Boy Advance, they're like secretly good.
Yeah.
A lot of them. And so you play them and you're like, wow, this is awesome. Like, this is a lot of fun and the soundtrack's good. It's like, why don't people talk about this? And then you realize unfortunately, I don't know, like handhelds people just feel differently about.
Yeah, well, there's that. And I feel like there's still a lot of stigma about licensed games. Because, I mean, you come from the NES and SNES era where licensed games just weren't that great.
Yeah.
And I mean, even now, ever so often, there are licensed games that are legitimately good. And I mean, it's definitely more common than it used to be. But I feel like people our age just still have the stigma about it.
Well, I mean, it's like, have you played Spider-Man on PS4?
Oh my
it's like,
God.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that right there should end any kind of debate in terms of licensed games not being good.
But that could
good
be
enough.
the exception, not the rule.
Oh,
So,
I don't think that licensed IP games have come a long way.
I agree. I'm just saying.
Yeah, for
we're
sure.
bitten twice shy.
Absolutely. There's a mini game in this as well that you can kind of play on its own when you first boot up the game, and it's basically, you remember in Sonic 2 you would play those bonus levels where you'd have to like roll around
on the sphere. Oh
on
no,
the sphere,
no,
in the tube.
In the tubes. Okay,
The tube. So it like basically like a half pipe.
Yes.
So you're kind of like rolling back and forth, and that's what you're doing in this. This is also a way that you transport your character from place to place, which is odd.
Oh yes, I was like, I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And I just realized, it's in between the levels.
Right.
Yes, okay.
You can also play it as a mini game in the
Really?
beginning of the game. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah, like when you first start up the game, it gives you the option to play it.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, definitely gave me vibes of that. Maybe a little bit of like Earthworm Jim, like the Andes Asteroids levels.
Okay, yeah.
In terms of like getting different power ups, and you can get like the wrong kind of power ups that like lower your health and that sort of thing.
And then I mean, running into anything completely kills your momentum and like stops you for a minute before you go back.
Right.
Yeah.
It's tough though. Like those areas are really tough to play. But the main game in and of itself, as we were saying before, it's basically just like a non-linear action platformer.
Yeah.
Where you're going around as Rodney and fighting enemies. The enemies are actually pretty decently sized as well, and they take a couple hits to knock out.
Yeah, nobody's really like a one-hit wonder, like just like the fodder that you just punch and kill.
No, there's no aha take on me.
Yeah.
Of bad guys. We'll name one other hit by aha.
Oh, right. I got you.
Exactly. All right, Justin, you're up next.
I am. So this next track is just called Upper City. So let's get to it. back. That was Upper City, and that is one of the few tracks I've actually heard when playing the game, because I think I've gotten there at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one I enjoyed just because of how relaxed it was. Like, this isn't like in the train station where you're being harassed by some, jerk robots who send you on a goose chase and then try to beat you up. You're kind of exploring, learning a little bit more about the game, and the music kind of echoes that in like a, hey, you don't have to be stressed out. You're just kind of checking around. It feels to me kind of like almost something Enya would do, or at the very least something new agey, which is a controversial statement because Enya does not consider herself new age. But either way, like there's a kind of a new age, like relaxed feel to this that I just kind of vibed. I made the joke when we were listening. I called it pure moods.
Metroid comes to mind for this one.
Really?
Yeah.
I feel like there's more meat to this than there is to the Metroid music. Or unless you're talking about not the original Metroid.
No, not the first game.
Yeah,
no.
I'm thinking like
some of the later
so
games.
Empty.
Some of the later games in particular, like stuff like Metroid Fusion or Metroid Zero Mission,
Gotcha.
or even like some of the like Prime games.
I was going to say, yeah, something out of Prime I could see.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, when you say Metroid, my brain always goes to the NES game. I'm just like, there's nothing there.
Yeah. It also kind of reminds me a little bit of, again, more RPG kind of elements too in this one, like RPG type of music.
Yeah, if this were in an RPG, this would, it kind of feels like exploring, but in an RPG, this feels like
a
menu music.
Menu, okay, interesting. I was going to say like searching through a cave or searching through like a city or a town or something like that.
True, but yeah, it would have to be something like really low stakes.
Oh,
like,
for sure.
Yeah,
super chill,
yeah.
like a cavern, like an ice cavern or something like that. Yeah, but that's the kind of the vibe that I got from it.
Yeah.
Visually, if I recall, this location is very kind of stoic. A lot of like the colors in this game are very like white or light blue, like very like the colors are almost like washed out, very like acid wash a little bit.
Okay.
It's not a bad look.
Yeah.
I like it. The immediate thing that comes to mind is there's a lost level in Mega Man X that was never, like, if you look on I think it's either on the back of the box or...
I thought it was the Nintendo Power advertisement.
Yeah. There's like a picture of like a really bright, futuristic, white-ish, light blue city. And it doesn't line up with any level in any of the games. So it's basically like a lost level that never made it into the actual game itself. So when I look at the visuals in this game, particularly in this area, it kind of reminds me of that.
That's fair. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really notice that with the colors. I'll say, like, not that like they looked bad or particularly like great or anything. It looked decent enough, but I didn't notice any of that. But
I feel like as you go higher up in the levels and advance more in the game, especially like you start going to areas that are like kind of like the hoity-toity kind of robot areas as you get closer to like Big Weld's mansion. Because you're basically, as Rodney, you're trying to show Big Weld this invention that you've made that, will change the world or whatever. And he's just like, he's not there. And they have like, it's almost like Oz kind of thing. Oh, yeah. Where like, there's a bunch of other people in charge and he's like, gone and nobody, knows where he is or whatever. But that's at least, again, I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know. I'm assuming that this lines up with the plot of the movie in and of itself. So it's been too long since I've seen like maybe the first like 25 minutes or so of the movie. So
yeah, but there's Big Weld and then there's Ratchet, who like Ratchet's I think the actual villain.
Yeah, Phineas T. Ratchet.
Yes,
and that's who you get into this meeting and you're basically like, hey, I wanted to show Big Weld my invention. And he's like, cool, see ya, and he kicks you out. So, yeah. And then you end up meeting up with some other characters, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Okay.
And that kind of brings me to a question about Game Boy Advance in general, because many Game Boy Advance soundtracks, we tend to see that they sound very muffled and tinny in a lot of aspects. It's particularly the Eastern composers, which is very odd considering how most of the, with things like the Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis, a lot of these game consoles are being created by those Eastern composers, so they generally have a much better handle on the sound that's being produced from them, especially from companies like Konami and Capcom, etc. But a lot of those soundtracks suffered from those same limitations.
Audio compression.
Yeah, the audio compression for the most part. But what I tend to notice, especially with Game Boy Advance, is there's so many soundtracks that Western composers, European and American composers created that actually don't sound muffled and tinny. They sound very rich and very clean and fresh and loud instead of sounding very muffled and tinny. So I'm curious what you used to make it sound so good in that aspect.
So the tinniness is kind of a choice. And this is like this philosophical thing that you have to just pick one side of when you set out to make the soundscape on the Game Boy Advance, which is one of the many hardware limitations is the tiny little speaker. And that will not reproduce bass sounds very well. I don't know where the cutoff is, but it's probably at like 100 hertz or something.
Yeah.
So
That's high. Wow.
do you have dominating bass in your mix that will just get completely lost if they're not using headphones? And I always chose to have that bass in there. Now, I would make sure that it was still a fun experience, but I wouldn't like high pass all of my bass sounds just to make room in the mix, just to accommodate that little speaker. So I mixed for the headphones first. And my guess is if it's sounding tinny, they probably decided to mix for the built-in speaker first. And it's just a choice for like, do you give up all of that bandwidth? Because the bass is the most dominating part of the mix. It has to be so loud to come across for something that will just disappear as soon as they unplug the headphones.
Right. Was there an engine, like a specific engine that you used for composing on this soundtrack?
Yeah, for the first few games, it was the official first-party thing, which was the Musix system by Factor 5. And that was like a MIDI-based thing that I would say the average, background song could have like 6 channels, maybe 8 if there wasn't too much going on. Because one of the other things about the GBA is the audio is mixed in software. So if the game has a lot going on, you can't expect to be able to use too many channels or too high of a sample rate. And so I would say the music system was like a good starter, but if you listen to the recordings from the hardware of starting, I want to say maybe around 2004, after like, I think I just did 3 Game Boy Advance games with music. And then we got a third-party driver called Craval by Sebastian Keinzel, and that was a direct S3M player. And S3M is a mod format. So Screen Tracker, Impulse Tracker can make these files that are just more or less directly played as you would hear them on the computer. And it was so well optimized for the GBA, and it was such like hand in glove solution for that once we switched to that, I was able to double the sample rate, I think from 8 to 16 kilohertz, and then you get more channels on top of it. I remember the first track I turned in under the new system was like the title screen for a Lord of the Rings game for Return of the King. And the producer emailed me back saying like, wow, this is such a huge change.
Wow. I'd say one of the ones that I know of that is one of the more popular engines is like the GAX engine, which Shinen created, which I believe was Manfred Linzner, I believe, which has like 32 channels and samples and synthesized instruments and reverb and filters and all sorts of cool stuff that they kind of had built in. But it sounds like you got yours from Factor 5, which makes sense because I've heard some of the Factor 5 stuff that's been out there and like on the GBA, it sounds really good. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense as to why you would use something like that for that particular sound.
Factor 5 had the first party thing that was like what Nintendo provides, and that's what I used at first. But Craval was, in my opinion, an improvement on that, just in terms of what I was able to do.
Sure, yeah.
Just being able to compose an impulse tracker, being able to use more channels, it opened up a lot for me once we switched to that.
So now I'm going to play you a track called Outmode Area, and again, it's from the Robots Game Boy Advance, also Nintendo DS game, and again, it's by composer Ian Stocker. Hey, you're back. And that was Outmode Area from Ian Stocker's Robots, Game Boy Advance, and Nintendo DS soundtracks. I don't know about the visual differences between the Game Boy Advance and the DS. I'm not sure if there are any.
I would imagine they're minor. Like I don't think there are like graphical, like it looks better on one than the other. But I mean, the DS has 2 screens, so
they may have added something.
Yeah, you, probably whatever the pause menu stuff is probably just always open on your bottom screen. Or maybe there's a map. I wonder.
Yeah, that would be super helpful if there was.
Yeah. To clarify, I think we both played the GBA version.
Yes.
Neither of us even.
I have the physical cart.
Oh, for the GBA.
On the GBA.
That's why.
Yeah, it's literally right here.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So I've been playing it. Yeah.
I did the illegal thing.
You illegal jerk.
Yep.
Face.
Cops are gonna come arrest me now.
That's it. Come on, Nintendo. Go get him. Actually, no, don't, because then he won't be able to do episodes anymore. So leave him be. But yeah, I'm not sure if there's much of a difference between the DS and GBA versions, but I would like to find that out.
This track kind of gave me like a Wastelands vibe.
Okay.
I'm not sure where, what's going on in the game or like where you physically are, but like just the overall vibe of this was just like Wastelands. I believe Outmode is the name of like the some of the older robots that people don't really like, or it's a gang or something.
Okay.
So I'm not sure. Hey, with that information, like in my head, I'm imagining like a Mad Max type of thing, just like rabid robots roving the wasteland. I don't know. But the thing that I really picked up on, that I really enjoyed in the song, was that wooden percussion block.
Yes.
I don't know if it's like a marimba or what it is, but some form of wooden percussion instrument.
Kind of like ascending and descending.
Yeah.
In a way, yeah.
That was really cool.
That really stood out, yeah.
Yeah, and then there was also this glissando effect that was used, which is like, when on a piano, when you roll from one note, you just like roll up the piano, roll down the piano. That's called a glissando.
Oh.
And there was a few things in here that sounded like that, and I was just like, oh, that's interesting, because a lot of the other note changes or like glides are more of like bends, and like this was a distinct, like we are glissing from one note to another, like. There's like 4 or 5, 6 notes in between. You called it a glissando? Glissando is the musical term. Yes.
Okay. If it was going to be shortened, would it be a glizzy?
I would probably just be gliss, but
Gliss,
yes, if you would like to call it a glizzy, you and your hot dogs can have a good time.
I don't know how glizzy became the short name for hot dogs. How did
it's
that
not a
happen?
short name. It's a slang term.
It's like a slang term.
I believe it's specifically like a Philadelphia or like a Pennsylvania slang term that just kind of got out.
People just like, let me get that glizzy.
Yeah,
I'm just like,
if I remember correctly, it's a specific restaurant that called them that, and then it just kind of went from there. Like,
that's
people calling
awesome.
Tissues Kleenex or copies Xeroxes type of thing.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. So I'm gonna call it a glizzy from now on.
Fair
Glissando.
enough.
Yeah.
Many of the games that Grip the Night worked on were licensed titles. So I'm curious, was there any creative guidance from the IP owners on any of the games that you created for them? Or did they just kind of like let you go?
Generally, they would just let me do my thing.
Nice.
I think part of it was that, like, the handheld games were not like their prime focus. They probably put a little more like energy looking at the console and like full production stuff. But out of the different existing IPs, I'd say Maxis with The Sims was the most hands-on and the most interested in what I was doing, and had the most feedback and suggestions for stuff they wanted to hear.
So seeing as this is licensed IP and it was being produced concurrently, how much, if any, did the team have access to in terms of the movie for development purposes? Like, did they just get like a general overview or
sketches of the characters or anything? Because I know there's a gallery in the game that you can unlock, like characters and like character art and stuff like that. But yeah, was there like anything else that they gave you other than like just the basics?
Yes, I got a video file, which was 55 minutes long. And it contained like kind of an intro from the director talking about the project and kind of hyping it up and describing the story and what it's all about. And then it had a ton of footage of in-progress renders, and some of them were scenes that were not like completely final in terms of render quality, but a lot of them were voiced. And so I got to see like a really rough kind of fragmented version of the movie.
Oh, cool.
That was missing a bunch of stuff, and so that was really useful in seeing just the tone of the movie.
Yeah, no, that's kind of cool in general. Like, I like work in progress stuff. Just as a general thing, I like seeing the progress from nothing to a finished product, and that's something that I've just kind of realized as you're talking about it. I don't think I've ever really seen much of that for especially like 3D CGI movies. Like the special features will often have like animatics and stuff like that, but like what you're describing sounds like somewhere between the animatics and the final product, like you said, like a rough cut of, or like a not full render of some of these things, but they're still voiced, and that to me is just really kind of interesting as a concept of something that like I'll probably never see.
Yeah. A lot of this soundtrack actually kind of reminds me a little bit of when we did a spotlight on Demo's Quest.
Oh yeah.
So if you like this type of music, I think you might also really enjoy the Demo's Quest episode because it's very similar.
Fair.
Yeah. All right. So now we're moving into your next pick.
Yes. So this is actually kind of a cheat because it's 2 songs, but they're 2 kind of short songs when they go with each other. So this is going to be the boss intro going into the boss battle.
You cheater.
You're listening to XVGM Radio.
Hey, thanks for sticking around. That was the combination of the boss intro and boss battle music from Robots,
Yeah.
the game we're talking about.
A lot of comparisons here to Mega Man X
Yeah, I can see that with
with that
just-
warning kind of
Yes, yeah, the little klaxon type thing.
Love that. And I love that it went with the beat like boo, ba, boo, boo, ba,
Yeah.
boo, ba.
I like that it went with the beat and was also there was a bit of offbeat stuff. Like
Yes.
it gets really chaotic in there. I mean, which it should because this is a boss fight. It's an important battle that you have to win.
Yeah.
So things will get a little scary. So the chaos and the music kind of helps emphasize that feeling overall.
A lot of really cool like mini keyboard runs there too, like the like that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
A little bit of Castlevania in there as well, some slight elements, but yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, the one thing that I noticed about this, so here we have some of the more driving stuff from this game, some of the more upbeat or faster tempo music, but I noticed this one doesn't feel as full as some of the other tracks. Like the other stuff that we've been playing, though it's been a bit more atmospheric, has felt full and like it feels like there's a lot there, but in this track, it feels like there's some like empty space. And I mean, I know that was intentional, but it's interesting because you've got this faster paced music that's a bit chaotic, and then at the same time, it feels kind of empty. So like it, to me anyway, adds to this like feeling of danger. Like not only is this chaotic and like hard to kind of work around, but like this emptiness there kind of makes you go like, what's going on?
Yeah. I will say that the track's bass line kind of did something a little bit different. The notes registered much higher, And when it did that, it kind of lost a lot of that kind of rounded, kind of squanchy kind of nature to it. And it kind of sounded a little bit more like, almost like you could hear the frets, you know, like it's much tighter sounding. So I thought that was pretty neat. I noticed that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. The boss intro in and of itself also kind of feels like a little bit of a Mega Man X kind of vibe. You know, like when you're talking to like Sigma in the first Mega Man X, it's got like that kind of and it's got those like haunting kind of synths.
Yeah, like something's coming.
Yeah. I kind of felt that here as well. I definitely picked up on that.
That's fair. I didn't, but I'm glad that I played the 2 tracks back to back like that, because that's a good comparison and a good thing to pull out.
Yeah, I agree. So in what way is this project different from others that you've worked on? What makes this one kind of stand out differently?
Well, not so much about the project itself, which was actually just a pretty straightforward project. There were no hiccups in it. I know it doesn't make for good radio for everything to go well. So it's just like, it was a really fun thing to work on. And it was just a 5-month thing where I had a lot of fun and created some great songs. And yeah, I was happy to be part of it. Mm-hmm. What's kind of stood out though is since then, it became my most popular soundtrack out of everything I've done. And that was surprising to me, considering it's up against Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, and especially the Sims stuff. It has like 50% more views on YouTube, and that's the only way I really can gauge the popularity.
Right.
Fair.
Because people are looking it up.
Certain the herbs outsold it like by an order of magnitude, if not more.
Sure.
But yeah, that's what makes it unique for me.
Interesting.
Cool.
Yeah. On the flip side, looking beyond just this one game, what project that you've worked on, what soundtrack is the one that you're the most proud of?
Yeah,
if you can
totally.
pick one.
Yeah, like in general.
If I'm going to go back to the handheld era, one of the last ones I did was Monster Tale, and I'm very happy with how that turned out. And this was a rare, non-existing IP. It's a brand new IP. And so I got to create character themes for characters that didn't have themes yet and pick the soundscape for this world. At that point, I was really comfortable with the DS sound chip and the hardware. And
yeah, this game. I remember
this.
Yeah. This is one of those games that I was like, I got to pick this up, and I just never did. I remember I was reading about it. I think it must have been in Nintendo Power or something like that, because that was back when Nintendo Power was still a thing.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, this is really cool. I need to pick this up, and I just never did. So like, that's like a blast from the past.
yeah, it was an indie game back before indie games were really a thing, especially on Nintendo systems.
Yeah. Developed by Dream Rift, published by Majesco.
That's cool.
And there was a remake in 2015.
Oh, wow. Were you on the remake too?
I don't know if the remake ever happened.
Oh, it was announced.
Oh.
I heard about it, but I don't know what happened with it.
In 2021, Majesco announced that Monster Tale would soon be coming to modern platforms. So it sounds like there may be
Might get a port.
a port coming.
Okay, well, that's good. Always good to re-release stuff, so that way it doesn't, because people like me go back and they're like, wait a minute, this might have a good soundtrack or be a good game or whatever. I'm going to go pick it up. And then you look on eBay and it's like $5 million. And you're like, nope, I'll just emulate it, which sucks because you want to own it.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? But it's nice to see stuff get like re-released.
Yeah.
All right, next up, I've got Aunt Fanny's Gallery. And that's it. That's all you need to know. It's Aunt Fanny's Gallery.
Let's hit it.
All right. right, welcome back. Aunt Fanny's Gallery is the name of that track. During the break, we were listening to it, and the first thing that popped up was fireworks, which I kind of ruined the song a bit for Justin. Because I was like, are those fireworks in the background? Like going, ee? And now, like, that's all you can hear when you hear the track, right?
True. But it's fun because I like fireworks.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Then while we were listening, I picked up like a very distinct, like kind of R&B, kind of like 90s kind of hip hop vibe to it. So I'm like sitting there like wordsmithing a little freestyle about Aunt Fanny and her gallery. Come on, girl, I just want to see your Fanny. Aunt Fanny's Gallery, you know. Come on in my gallery. Aunt Fanny, I want to see your Fanny in the gallery. You know, kind of like that.
And then I informed him that this episode will now be unplayable in the United Kingdom.
Right, because apparently it means a word that it's slang for digital giblets. Let's just put it that way, I guess. Anyways, yeah, so really chill track here. Again, those fireworks, even though like we were laughing about it and like listening, it was really cool to hear something like that was that distinct, that was like, it really kind of felt, which is weird because it's just a gallery. That is what this plays at. Like,
is it like an image gallery, like an extra in the game? Okay.
Yeah, you're going through and you're just looking at all the pictures that you've unlocked, and they're just like still images from like the movie, I'm assuming.
Yeah, or like animatics or sketches and stuff like that.
Yeah.
No, like bonus content. Which,
Right.
I used to be a lot bigger into, a long time ago, not so much anymore because it's just like I want to play the game or watch the movie and enjoy it and move on. But yeah, that's cool. I meant to ask actually when we came back from listening if that's what that was, because that was my assumption by the title, but who knows, it could be an area in the game where somebody named Aunt Fanny owns an art gallery and you have to like go through it. But yeah, this seemed way too laid back, even more so than the other chill tracks that we played, to actually be like regular in-game music to me.
Yeah. Aunt Fanny is one of the characters that you meet, if I recall, along with, there's a handful of characters that are just like the good guys, so to speak, and she's one of them, if I recall. So yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Yay. If you can, I'm curious, what's like a day in the life of Kryptonite like? As far as like you start off like, from beginning of your day to composing, and then at the end, how does that all kind of sort out?
Well, I was never an official employee of Kryptonite. I was always a contractor. And they were in Seattle. I was in California. So I would visit them several times a year when we were in full swing.
Okay.
I was always doing at least 3 things at once. I think the maximum I was doing maybe around 2005 was 9 simultaneous projects with them.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And so I think it's kept pretty standard game development hours, like 10 a.m. till around dinner time. That really would vary. I was up there a couple times during crunch, which was sometimes really eye-opening. Like people were there until 1 or 2 a.m. because it was usually just some programmer frantically fixing bugs while everyone else is kind of there in solidarity. And every now and then I would get to work on something, like finish something up for a milestone that was happening while I was there, and actually do work, not just have meetings all day. And I'd be able to like submit the new audio, and then it was really cool. I remember one time just submitting the stuff while I was there, and I forget which project this was for, but the project lead called everyone in to hear the new audio, like into the office. It was like this special Christmas morning thing. And I was like, is this a normal thing? And apparently it kind of was. They liked hearing the new audio drops. So that was cool, because I would deliver the stuff and just not know for a couple weeks until I'd get the new build or something. I wouldn't know how well it worked or if anyone had heard it.
That's really cool.
Yeah. All right, so we're moving from a gallery to a battle. What kind of battle are we moving into?
We're moving on to Madam Gasket Battle.
Cool.
So we're going to hear what that sounds like. welcome back. You just listened to Madam Gasket Battle from Robots, composed by Ian Stalker. And yeah, another one of the more fast-paced ones. This one actually feels a bit more full than the boss battle that we listened to a few ago.
Yeah.
But there are still moments where it's just very minimal and feeling kind of empty, and then it kind of picks up again and goes into, you know, everything with the drums and whatnot.
Yeah.
I've noticed this is true, I think, of the last couple of tracks we've played. It feels like we're getting a little bit away from some of the 80s sounds, and we're not playing these tracks in like chronological order or anything, so it's not like, you know, as the game progresses it gets more and more modern or anything. It's just some songs have more of an 80s feel to them, while others don't lean so much into that, which, you know, makes sense. For one, I don't expect a soundtrack about robots to feel 100% like the 80s, unless they were all like, you know, had laser eyes and was like, you know, the Attack of the Robots or something.
They all had shades and mohawks and stuff like, hey, bro.
Yeah, something that feels like it's from the
Unical.
80s. Because, like, this movie did not have an 80s feel to it from what I saw in the trailers. So it's just good to see, like, the breadth of style or the different choices that Ian made as he went throughout, you know, composing this.
Yeah, I will say that even though this is very much more busy than the boss battle, this is probably the busiest track that we've played so far in terms of stuff that's going on in it. I'd say the pace and the BPM is pretty high as compared to some of the other stuff that we've done. But this also sounds the most video game-ish.
Yes,
as you kind of mentioned. I noticed this, as well as the boss battle, were very distinctly like, hey, let's make tracks that sound like they belong in a video game. Whereas the rest of this is just like super chill. Like, it kind of reminds me of the Amiga, Tetris CDI, like a lot of like more laid back kind of chill, exploratory kind of soundtracks. Metroid comes to mind, like some of the Metroid games. So yeah, this was an interesting soundtrack overall, but when we hit this part of the soundtrack, it definitely feels like these songs are becoming more video game-like, which makes sense because boss battles and things like that, they need to be a little bit more amped up.
Yeah, and a lot of the like background music or like town themes and stuff like that is going to be more cinematic because it's not as in your face. So, yeah, I get it.
So in the game, you go further down basically when you get thrown out of Big Weld's factory and you come across these characters named the Rusties. That's like their group. And those are the characters that I mentioned earlier that are basically like outcasts, so to speak. They're called outmodes.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at earlier when you played the Outmode Area.
Yep. So they are basically telling you that they are trying to avoid getting destroyed by Big Weld, or at least Phineas T. Ratchet, rather. So Rodney helps out this other robot named Jack Hammer. And then he ends up finding out that there's like some sort of party up in the higher regions of the area. So he goes there and ends up in a fight with Phineas T. Ratchet. And afterwards, we travel to Big Weld's mansion. Yeah. I tend to find that a lot of licensed games have amazing soundtracks. I don't know why that is.
Yeah.
But it really is interesting. I mean, going as far back as like the NES era, where you had like a lot of LJN games with soundtracks by like Tim Follin and Jeff Follin, and you know. So what I'm curious about is, do you have like a favorite licensed IP project that you've worked on? Because you've worked on several. So is there any specific licensed IP that you would say, hey, you know, this was probably my favorite project to work on?
I mean, if we're counting The Sims, I'm pretty proud of The Sims stuff. That was an existing IP, but it's not exactly a tie-in, which I think is what you're...
Yeah, more like licensed IP, like a Marvel Comics or a DC or like this, like robots, you know, that sort of thing.
There's a Lemony Snicket game
that
was a tie-in for the Jim Carrey movie, and it came out not long after Robots, and I don't think the game did very well, but I'm to this day pretty proud of some of the songs I did for it. It's a very dark, orchestral, brooding, kind of mischievous soundtrack with a lot of bells. That's something I think of as like nobody really knows about it, and it hasn't really blown up on YouTube the way Robots has. But it's something I'm proud of. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's the one from 2004, right?
Yeah, should be about that.
Okay, yeah, that came out in what was it? PS2, Xbox, GameCube. Yeah, all of the consoles basically in the 2004 era.
Okay.
Oh, that's really cool.
And that's a perfect segue into my next pick, which is Inside the Mansion. Yeah.
Let's go.
All right, thanks for joining us back on our Robot Spotlight for the Game Boy Advance and DS. That track that we just heard was called Inside the Mansion by Ian Stalker.
This belongs on our Spooky Fest for sure.
I agree.
Definite spooky vibes. Definitely gave me like Resident Evil-ish. This is another one like one of the earlier tracks we played where we said it could be in like Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
This also has that same kind of feeling to it.
Especially that piano, that dun 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 dun
Yeah.
dun, dun. That like trailing piano.
Trailing
that's-
it with an echo.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm getting the idea that this mansion might be haunted, question mark?
Possibly. I also want to note that the bass line is near identical to the Fester's Quest sewer bass line, the do, 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 do.
Yeah, this one's a little bit slower.
Yeah,
like
and
you said.
it does have a couple notes here and there that kind of do deviate a little bit, maybe hang a little bit on this version. But this version's also a
What are
little
you, Vanilla Ice?
a little slower. What? It's true.
Theirs goes, ours goes, theirs.
It's true.
No, I
Just
know,
saying.
I know. I'm just busting your chops. But no, that's funny.
There's a little tick in there. Do 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 tick do do do. Yeah. Oh, Vanilla Ice. Yeah. So cool track. I was digging this, but yeah, this is the track I believe that plays in the mansion when you go to Big Weld's mansion. You find him, and he's basically like, "Well, I don't think this is gonna amount to anything. Like, I don't think your invention or whatever is gonna amount to anything, but I'm gonna help you out anyways." So yeah. So you mentioned a couple soundtracks already, Final Fantasy 3 or 6, whatever you want to call it, and Secret of Mana. Were there any others that were around that time that you were really digging that kind of inspired you?
Sure. I mean, too many to mention. The Super Nintendo probably had the most. Of course, Chrono Trigger. Some like lesser known ones. I really loved The Lost Vikings. It's just a great hip hop soundtrack that really influenced me, like for the rest of my career. That not a lot of people would expect to be what it is. I mean, it's the Viking game, but it's a hip hop soundtrack.
Yeah, I think that was Matt Furness.
For the Blizzard
Lost
game?
Vikings. Yeah. I know. I believe he did the Genesis port. I'm not sure if he did the Super Nintendo one, but I believe he did
The only name I know associated with it is Charles Deenan, but don't quote me on that.
Oh, okay.
I think Charles Deenan did a bunch of stuff for Blizzard.
Okay.
You know, I think you might be right, Mike. I think the console ports.
Yeah.
Well, the not console ports, the other ports, because wasn't it originally an SNES game?
Yeah, it was Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis.
Yeah, Charles Deenan, Alistair Brimble, and Matt Furness are all attached to it.
Okay.
Yeah, so don't quote me. Fact check me on these. But yeah, that was a great one. Lagoon, which was also for the X68000.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that had a pretty good soundtrack too.
Influenced me, like, in terms of just a lot of my songs from then on were driven by the bass, would be the best way to put it. Because all of Lagoon had these really catchy, funky bass lines that were like kind of the backbone of the song.
Yeah.
From start to finish.
And that kind of checks out here with Robots. You know, when it comes to the sound here, there's a lot of really cool influences that we kind of picked up on. One of the synths in one of the songs sounds like a theremin almost. There's a lot of like interesting note bends here and there that the instrument itself almost sounds like a theremin. The drums are really punchy and the bass is particularly driving. I kind of heard a little bit of Kraftwerk here and there as well in terms of like the sound. Yeah, like almost like I think it's maybe the limitations of the GBA kind of mixed in with this very like funk meets like industrial meets. It's got a lot of really neat influences musically speaking, but a lot of the songs have a lot of variety in them as well.
Yeah, I mean, the soundtrack itself has a really good variety, I have to say.
Yeah.
Like, you've got songs that are, I mean, I guess every soundtrack has, you know, the range of, like, songs that are really slow and songs that are more upbeat.
Yeah.
But the cohesiveness between them, like, so I'd noticed that a lot of the songs that are named after particular characters, like Rodney and Ratchet, are kind of the slower songs, which I haven't gotten far enough in the game to hear all the tracks yet, but I'm imagining that those songs are tracks that play when you're either meeting or maybe talking to those characters, which makes sense if it's more like dialogue based versus things like Train Station. Obviously, like the boss battles tend to be a bit more high energy. but the range and the cohesiveness within that range is one of the things that I thought was really good, just because like you've got a solid sound from beginning to end.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a consistent sound too. From the beginning of the soundtrack to the end, it all sounds like one cohesive album, you know, in a way. All right, so what you got coming up next?
All right, so this is my last track of this episode, and the title of this is simply Rodney. All right, thank you for staying tuned. This was Rodney. The name of the track from the Robots soundtrack is what that was. And this comes up near the end of the soundtrack. In the track listing, this is right before credits, so I'm guessing this is like an ending to the game before the credits roll, like either, you know, an ending cutscene where good things are happening, or something near the end of the game, either right before or right after you finish the final fight.
Yeah, no, this was very sad and very like somber. Pianos with light strings in the background tend to do that, but I was digging this. It was a nice add to the soundtrack.
Yeah, I got at the start, I got kind of like lullaby vibes from it.
Yes.
And as it kept going on, it really felt like a music box.
Oh, yeah.
Like the piano was very delicate. Like it's not quite as tinny as the music from a music box would be, but the piano to me sounded very much like they were trying to imitate the sound of what you'd get out of a music box.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Let's go back a little bit in terms of your history. We talked a little bit about your musical background and everything, but how did you actually become a video game composer? Like, how did that process start? Did you like reach out to a specific company, or did you get hired in another way? Like, how did that all come about?
Yeah, I actually spent a lot of years reaching out to different companies, sending out demo CDs. Yeah, I don't remember how many I sent out, but that did not work. What worked for me was, back before I did this professionally, every now and then I would get an email from someone saying, I'm making a game, will you make the soundtrack for it? Because they would see the songs that I'd written or heard some arrangement I did of something. Mm-hmm. And I would generally be like, okay, I'll like do a song, and if it keeps going, I can continue. The projects really never materialized because making games is very hard. Mm-hmm.
Sure. So
I got an email from a guy named Tom Hewlett, who was making a JRPG for the Game Boy Color around 2000. So this is 24 years ago. And he really liked a song I did called Mithri. He named the JRPG Mithri after this song.
Oh, wow.
I was like, will you do the OST? It's very Final Fantasy oriented. And I'm like, that sounds like fun. But it's a Game Boy Color. I don't know how to write music for Game Boy Color. Like, I've never done that before. I think I could do it if I had the tools. And so I pretty much just said, like, if you can get me the official tools, I will make you this soundtrack. And I did not at all expect him to just come back with, here's the tools. To be an indie in America and get official Nintendo dev status and then buy these tools, like, that's really unheard of.
Yeah.
In that time. So I was impressed. I'm like, all right, I'm on board. I'll do this. And that was my first experience making a game soundtrack. And I learned a lot. We were all learning how to make a game, you know, on the job. And the game got pretty far along. It probably got halfway done before it was scrapped mainly because the programmer like could not afford to just live off of nothing. Like, he needed income.
Ramen can only travel so far.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. So I was able to actually finish the soundtrack, including sound effects for all the spells and everything like that. And so I became pretty proficient at the official Game Boy Color audio tools. And went on my own way, worked as a web developer for a little bit, like just did random stuff. And I get an email out of the blue. Turns out that programmer, Josh Meads, went to Amaze Entertainment, who's starting a new handheld division called Kryptonite Games. And he wanted to work there as a programmer. He's like, I know the Game Boy Color. Here's this game that's mostly finished. I programmed it. And it had my music on it. And so they're like, who is the composer? And so I get an email randomly from Steve Ettinger, the executive producer of Kryptonite, asking if I have any interest in doing music. They're starting this handheld division, and their in-house audio team is already really busy, and they hate doing the like low spec stuff. So let's talk. So yeah, that just kind of speaks to like the power of a network over sending blind portfolio stuff.
Oh, yeah. It's much more personable because you can actually like interact with these people. We interviewed somebody else, Nicole Marie T.
Oh, yes.
We were talking to Nicole Marie T several episodes ago. She mentions a very similar path because she's an indie composer as well. But she was just putting out music, just putting it out and putting it out. And it caught the eye of somebody who was like, hey, we'd love to use this for our game. So it really does feel like, especially nowadays, the best way to get in a game is to just produce your own content and put it out there and be like, this is my stuff. And then hopefully the web will find it and kind of let it get to where it needs to go so that you know, you can find a home for it. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, the volume of work is for sure helpful. And then the necessary step is someone finds that volume of work, and then now you're building a network because now you have this person who likes what you're doing and is keyed in, and then that person can lead you to other things, even if nothing directly works out with the first connection. Pretty much all the gigs I've ever gotten have been just through people that I've already worked with in some fashion. So it's rough because until you break in, you're nobody. And then once you've broken in, it's so much easier, and it's unfair, but that's just kind of how it works.
Yeah, what do they say? It's not what you know, but who you know. Exactly.
Yeah, the power of networking.
Yes, yes.
All right. That leaves us with one last track. What are you going to close us out with?
All right, so I'm going with Journey to Big Weld, which is our final track that we'll be playing off the Robots, Game Boy Advance, and DS soundtrack by our guest composer, Ian Stocker. welcome back, and thanks for joining us again once more on our finale for the Robots Game Boy Advance DS soundtrack, and again by the composer Ian Stocker. Journey to Big Weld was the name of that track, and I believe that is the track that plays right after the initial boss battle train opening, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's like the next major plot point is trying to get to Big Weld.
Yeah. It's a really good track. This one, by far, which I'm just going to jump way ahead because I know at the end of our episode, we say, we pick our favorite tracks or whatever, but this is definitely my favorite for sure. So
This is a really good one. Yeah.
really funky, really fun, and super chill, but also just like really funky. I love those like muted kind of horns, those like, it's almost like a theremin in a way, which that first track that we played had a bit of as well. So yeah, it's really good. Plus the drums are just so punchy, and that bass line is just, it hooks you, man. It's just so fun.
Yeah, no, I agree. I thought the opening to this track actually felt a bit epic, and then as we got into it, I was like, oh, there's the return of those 80s sounds.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it actually kind of mixes with, like you were talking about the bass line. The bass line feels more like funkish, more like something from the 70s.
Agreed.
So, again, the music stylings have quite a range in this one.
Yeah.
And this track in particular, I agree from what you said at the top of the episode, it's going to be hard to pick a favorite track.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of other stuff here that I really enjoyed, but this one, again, takes us back to, the kind of more relaxed, more chill stuff, and it was just a pleasure to listen to.
Absolutely. Yeah, the whole soundtrack was just phenomenal. So what is your favorite track? Since I already picked Journey to Big Weld.
You're doing things out of order here.
I know.
So podcasts out of order. Big Weld Interior was really good. It's kind of between Big Weld Interior and Journey to Big Weld. I don't know that I can really pick between the two of them because they both had things that I really enjoyed.
Yeah. Well, we absolutely appreciate the interview. I think we're out of questions, but of the tracks that we've picked here on this list, do you have a particular favorite that you've maybe can recognize and say, hey, that's my favorite track?
I think the one that is aged the best would be Upper City.
Okay. Do you have any projects coming out in the near future, be it video game related or otherwise, that you wanted to promote that you can talk about, or where can we find you on the web if anybody wants to come find you to kind of dive deeper into your projects?
Well, yeah, actually, I'm kind of on the sidelines for the past 3 years and for the foreseeable future. I don't know when I'll be back to work, but I have a diagnosis of ME/CFS, which is an exertion intolerance type of condition, and it has kind of prevented me from working the last few years, unfortunately.
Oh, no.
Sorry to hear that.
And, yeah, we'll see what happens in terms of treatments and recovery. There are people who have gotten out of it before, and that's a possibility. But yeah, I went from doing game soundtracks in my 20s to indie games in my 30s to very little in my 40s. So we're just kind of waiting. There are soundtracks you could listen to from my indie games. Yeah, Soulcaster and Escapegoat 1 and 2 are probably my best work in terms of music, just because I could do whatever I wanted for those soundtracks. And they're kind of the most definitively my style with no restrictions. So you'll hear some robots in there, especially in Soulcaster 2.
Oh.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah, I see your Bandcamp is Magical Time Bean, so we'll link to that as well so people can check you out.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we wish you the best of luck and hope that you have a speedy recovery with what you're going through. And we hope to hear more from you soon. And thanks again so much for taking the time to chat with us about robots and your career with VGM.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah. Anytime. I really like this soundtrack. It's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was, like I said at the beginning, this was a surprise in how much fun both the game and the soundtrack were.
Yeah, I'm going to go back and finish the game at some point. Like, keep playing through it since I got it on my analog pocket that
Nice.
I've picked up not too long ago. So I'm just playing it and enjoying it, and just got to figure out where to go next because I'm really lost. But
That's fair.
Yeah.
Also, going back to something we talked about earlier, I did look up some of the differences between the DS and the Game Boy Advance version.
Oh, cool.
And so the DS version of the game does feature a map that can be annotated by the player. So like the second screen is basically a map that you can, put points on and whatnot. There's also a unique 3D version of the Transit Ball game that utilizes the stylus for control.
Ooh.
It also has 3D menus.
Oh, that's really cool. Oh, man, I may have to end up grabbing that version instead.
It'd be cool if you could transfer your save between the two.
That'd be cool. I mean, I'm not that far in. I'm like 40% in.
I just think it would be cool.
Yeah. No, I'm going to have to upgrade to the DS version because, as much as I'm enjoying playing this on Game Boy Advance, having a map available that's a huge get. Which is exactly what the DS was made for. I mean, having a second screen on there really helps with stuff like that. So definitely a big rock solid upgrade.
Yeah. So we'd like to take a moment to thank our Patreon patrons, without whom this show's continued improvement would be impossible. They are Cam Worma, Jordan and Anson Davis, Rage Cage, Kung Fu Carlito of the Heroes 3 podcast, Scott McElhone, Claire Myers, Brad Austin, Chris Murray, Llama Adam, Marcus Stewart, Nick Davis, Ryan McPherson, and Robin Purnell Best Friends Club / Rhythm and Pixels.
If you would like to become a patron, you can sign up at patreon.com/XVGM Radio. There you can see the different tiers as well. Just $1 gets you a thank you and access to our monthly live shows.
You can visit our website, xvgmradio.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and learn more about your hosts, as well as any of our guests or composers that we've had on the show.
If you'd like to reach out to us, you can always email us at xvgmradio@gmail.com.
If you like what you've heard, please consider giving us a review on iTunes.
You can join our Facebook group and chat with other VGM lovers at www.facebook.com/groups/XVGM Radio, where we talk about everything from current game news to sharing awesome VGM tracks or just talking about the podcast itself.
You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle on both those sites is @XVGM Radio.
If you don't have any other social media or just want to try something unique, check us out on our Discord group chat. Links in the show notes. All right, coming up on episode 114, we are going to be venturing into the wild and wacky world of wrestling video game music.
That is correct.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at all sorts of stuff. WWF, WWE, or whatever they call
WCW.
it now. WCW, Fire Pro Wrestling, ECW. I'm sure we're going to tackle it all.
The generic Nintendo brand.
Yes, yeah. So we're going to get into it, and I'm sure both of us have stories to tell about our wrestling experiences, and we may or may not have a guest for this one, so stay tuned for that.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Also, coming up, or possibly having just passed, it's not clear when this episode is going to come out, but definitely having passed a little while ago, was on the 18th of June. We did XVGM After Dark. We listened to the Final Fantasy VII Remake Jukebox vinyl that Mike owns, and I know that music is fantastic. That's going to be a great time. If you missed it, that'll be on my Twitch VOD, so you can go to twitch.tv/shock83j16 and check that out there. Coming up in the month of July, on the 16th, we will be listening to Super Mario Bros. 2. That'll be a quick listen, but I really enjoyed that soundtrack. And I when I was going through Mike's collection, I saw that and was like, oh, I haven't listened to this soundtrack in a while. And it always brings me joy. So we're going to give that a listen. And then on July 5th, either it just recently passed or it's coming right up, we've got a Patreon episode. So at the moment, we are still collecting votes for what it's going to be, but so far, the 4 people that have all voted for Jeff Fallon tribute, as he has recently passed away. So I have a feeling that's probably what we're going to be doing.
Yeah.
All things considered. If that changes, we go with what you tell us as the patrons when it comes to these episodes. So if it changes, it changes. If not, Jeff Fallon tribute is going to be a fantastic time. There's so much good music there.
Oh, absolutely.
Check that out if you can. And if you're not already a patron, you can become a patron for as little as $1 and get access to all of those live shows, as well as, thank yous in the credits and everything else.
Yeah, live show, like at least a couple of years worth of live shows. So you got a lot to listen to if you become a Patreon member. You get a lot of bonus stuff.
Yeah.
All right, well, this is Mike
And Justin.
signing off for XVGM Radio. Hey, you're back. And that was Outmode Area from Ian Stocker's Robots. Blah, 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 puh. Oh boy.
I love it.
So next up, I'm going to play you a track called Outmode Area. And again, this is from our Robots introspective look. No,
I suppose.
that's terrible. I don't even know what I'm going with that. That's just bad. Blech.